Ted Cruz stands at the center of the Senate floor, his voice sharp as he delivers a biting, sarcastic jab aimed directly at Kamala Harris. He leans forward, almost daring her to react. "Let's be clear, Madam Vice President," Cruz says, his tone dripping with condescension, "you've always been more about grandstanding than actually governing. Isn't it convenient how you and your allies are always fighting for the people, except when it involves making the tough calls?" The room hums with tension as Cruz takes a slight step back, his eyes scanning the chamber, daring anyone to disagree with him. His words hang in the air, loaded with judgment, attempting to strip Harris of her credibility in front of a nation watching closely. His smirk is barely concealed, but there's something almost too calculated in his delivery. He thinks he has her cornered. The camera cuts to Kamala Harris, sitting calmly at her desk. Her expression remains unflinching, her eyes focused on Cruz. She doesn't flinch. Doesn't blink. Just sits there, steady, almost imperceptible in her poise. The contrast between Cruz's aggression and Harris's composed demeanor is undeniable. The tension builds, the sound of the Senate chamber becoming quieter, the murmurs dying down. Every eye is on Harris now, waiting for her response. Cruz stands tall, his arrogance palpable as he watches her, certain she will crumble under the weight of his attack. But Harris says nothing. The room becomes a vacuum, thick with anticipation. She raises her hand slowly, deliberately. The weight of her calm is almost suffocating as the Senate hangs on her every move. "Is that the best you've got, Senator?" Harris says softly, but her voice carries, every word sharp, precise, and steady. The silence deepens. Cruz's smirk falters just for a second. The anticipation is electric. Harris hasn't given an inch, hasn't blinked, and Cruz's attack feels more like a poorly timed joke than a legitimate threat. But what happens next would leave the Senate, and the nation, speechless. Ted Cruz had long earned his place as one of the most polarizing figures in American politics. His career was defined by fiery rhetoric, calculated attacks, and a deep well of controversial statements. He thrived in the chaos, choosing his battles carefully, always swinging hard for the headlines. To some, he was a warrior of conservative values, unapologetic in his crusade against the establishment. To others, he was a divisive, self-serving politician who rarely hesitated to use personal attacks to score points. This latest confrontation with Kamala Harris was nothing new. Cruz had always relied on provocation to fuel his image. He'd made his name by attacking his political adversaries, never shying away from a cheap shot. But this time, it was different. This wasn't just any political exchange, it was personal. Cruz had pushed the boundaries, attempting to dismantle Harris's credibility on a national stage, knowing that any crack in her armor would make headlines for days. His rhetoric wasn't about policy, it was about dismantling a woman who had risen to one of the highest offices in the land, a woman of color, a woman of immense power, and a symbol of the changing face of American politics. The Senate floor was no stranger to conflict, but the timing of this attack couldn't have been more critical. The debate at hand was one of monumental importance, shaping policies that would affect the future of the country. This wasn't about petty squabbles, it was about issues that would determine the direction of the nation: healthcare, voting rights, climate change, and the very structure of government. But Cruz didn't care about these issues. No, this was about winning, about making Harris, the first woman, first black woman, first South Asian woman to hold the office of vice president, appear weak, unfit for leadership. This was about questioning her ability to lead. But Cruz's attack wasn't just about a moment of personal drama. It was about something deeper. It was an attack on the integrity of leadership itself. The very essence of public service. Cruz was implying that Harris, like so many in power, was out of touch with the people. He was playing on the resentment of a divided electorate, taking a shot at someone he believed could easily be undermined. Yet, what he failed to see, or perhaps what he underestimated, was just how much his words revealed about the battle being waged in America. This wasn't about a singular attack on one politician. It was about the corrosive force of political extremism and personal vilification that had seeped into every corner of governance. It was about a system where truth was often sacrificed for spectacle, and where every debate seemed to end in a war of personalities rather than ideas. But Harris wasn't just any politician. She wasn't going to be caught in Cruz's trap. This wasn't merely a clash between two political figures, it was a reflection of a broader struggle for the soul of the American government. On one side, you had Cruz, the embodiment of a politics that thrived on division, spectacle, and slander. On the other, you had Harris, a figure of integrity and resilience, someone who had fought every step of the way to prove herself worthy of the office she held. As Cruz delivered his taunt, the room's tension grew heavier. The cameras flashed, capturing every second, every facial expression, every flicker of emotion. The stakes were higher than ever, and the political pressure was mounting. This was no longer just a debate, it was a battle over values. Harris had to prove that public service still meant something. That leadership could be about truth, dignity, and integrity, not cheap shots and attacks. The tension hung in the air. The audience was watching, the stakes rising with every word. This exchange would set the stage for a showdown like no other. Ted Cruz's rise in American politics was anything but conventional. From the very beginning, he made a name for himself not through compromise or consensus, but through a brutal, take-no-prisoners approach to politics. His reputation was built on fiery rhetoric, ideological purity, and a willingness to fight dirty. While others worked the backrooms, brokering deals, Cruz was the one on the front lines, making headlines with divisive speeches and calculated attacks on the political establishment. Cruz's political playbook was clear: if you wanted to stand out in a deeply polarized political environment, you had to be willing to fight, to be unapologetic, and, most importantly, to go on the offensive. There was no room for nuance or diplomacy, only sharp jabs and aggressive tactics. From his time as Solicitor General of Texas, where he took on President Obama's administration with fervor, to his rise as a firebrand senator, Cruz became known for using his platform as a megaphone for the most controversial conservative talking points. His rise wasn't just about policy, it was about pushing buttons, stirring outrage, and playing on the fears of the American people. In the Senate, Cruz's reputation as a provocateur only grew. He didn't shy away from the spotlight, in fact, he seemed to crave it. While many senators worked quietly on legislation, Cruz was always in the thick of the drama, picking fights with anyone who dared stand in his way. His now infamous 2013 government shutdown stunt was emblematic of his approach, using his office as a vehicle for ideological warfare, regardless of the consequences for the country. To Cruz, it was never about the greater good, it was about making a statement, winning the fight, and taking down anyone who didn't share his worldview. This was a man who thrived on conflict, whose very political identity seemed inseparable from his willingness to create chaos. His tactics in the Senate were simple: provoke, attack, repeat. Cruz knew that in a divided political landscape, the more controversial the statement, the more attention it would receive. And attention was power. The more divided the country became, the more Cruz's brand of politics seemed to flourish. His words didn't need to be conciliatory or unifying, they just had to resonate with those who shared his views. His constant tirades against the Washington elite and his consistent portrayal of himself as an outsider gave him a loyal following, but it also created a host of enemies. In a body like the Senate, where relationships and alliances often dictate success, Cruz's inability to play the game left him isolated. He wasn't a team player, and his confrontational style alienated colleagues on both sides of the aisle. He didn't care, after all, he wasn't there to make friends. He was there to win, no matter the cost. But it was this very arrogance that would be his undoing. Cruz believed his reputation as a master provocateur was enough to dismantle anyone who crossed him. And on this fateful day, he had clearly underestimated Kamala Harris. He was certain that his well-worn playbook, his arsenal of condescending remarks and personal jabs, would be enough to rattle her. After all, she was a political newcomer, someone who had spent years in the spotlight but was still finding her feet in the national arena. He assumed that Harris, with her calm demeanor, would be a pushover, too measured, too careful, too unwilling to engage in the brutal game of confrontation. But Cruz's arrogance led him to miscalculate. His assumption that Harris would buckle under his attack was a fundamental flaw. Cruz, with all his bravado and his years of experience in the art of divisive politics, couldn't comprehend the depth of Harris's composure. He thought he could break her, that his snide remarks and cheap shots would be enough to expose her as weak or unqualified. What Cruz failed to see was that Harris wasn't just playing a different game, she was playing a game he couldn't even begin to understand. Where Cruz thrived on the chaos of conflict, Harris found strength in the calm of her convictions. For Cruz, this wasn't just another moment in a long career of attacks. This was an opportunity to knock down one of the highest-ranking officials in the country, to make her look small, vulnerable, and out of place. He thought he had the upper hand, and for a moment, it seemed like he did. But in underestimating her, he had set the stage for his own downfall. This was more than just a clash between two politicians, it was a clash of ideologies, of strategies, of values. The arrogance that had served Cruz so well in the past was now the very thing that would set him up for failure. In a moment when a less experienced politician might have faltered, Kamala Harris's calm, methodical approach would make him look not just reckless, but small. And as Cruz stood there, waiting for her to flinch, he had no idea just how wrong he was about to be. The stage was set, and the real battle was about to begin. Kamala Harris wasn't born into privilege, nor was she handed a political career on a silver platter. She was born in Oakland, California, in 1964, to immigrant parents who had come to America seeking the kind of opportunity that was promised to all but seldom delivered. Her mother, Shyamala Gopalan Harris, a scientist and breast cancer researcher, came from India, and her father, Donald Harris, a Jamaican economist, brought with him a legacy of resilience. Kamala's upbringing wasn't cushioned by wealth or ease, but it was rich in values that would shape the woman she would become: determination, empathy, and an unyielding belief in justice. Growing up in a mixed-race household, Kamala learned early on that the world didn't always welcome those who were different. She experienced firsthand the sting of racial prejudice, yet it was precisely these challenges that would forge the inner strength and composure she carried with her into the political arena. Her mother would instill in her the mantra, "You may be the first, but make sure you're not the last." Those words became a guiding principle in Harris's life, motivating her to be both a trailblazer and a relentless fighter for equity and opportunity. Despite the obstacles in her path, Kamala didn't just survive, she excelled. She graduated from Howard University, a historically black college in Washington, D.C., where she earned her degree in political science and economics. From there, she went on to the University of California, Hastings College of the Law, where she earned her law degree. But it wasn't just about academic success, it was about purpose. Even as a young lawyer, Harris was drawn to public service, inspired by the belief that the law could be a tool for change. She worked her way through the system, fighting for victims of crime, standing up for the marginalized, and earning a reputation for her commitment to justice and fairness. Her career as California's Attorney General was a defining chapter, where her determination and political acumen would be tested time and again. Harris rose to prominence through a series of difficult cases that challenged not just her legal expertise but her ability to stand firm under pressure. In a role where she was constantly under scrutiny, she learned to navigate the cutthroat world of California politics, balancing the demands of law enforcement, social justice, and political survival. Every decision she made was scrutinized, every move carefully considered. She faced criticism from all sides: progressives who believed she wasn't tough enough on crime, conservatives who thought she wasn't tough enough on criminals. Yet, through it all, Harris remained unwavering, grounded in her belief that the law should serve the people, not the powerful. Her leadership in the AG's office was marked by a commitment to fighting for the common good, whether it was by championing criminal justice reform, protecting consumers, or defending marriage equality. She wasn't just serving the state, she was serving a higher ideal, the principle that the law could, and should, reflect the values of justice, equality, and fairness. Her integrity in handling complex, controversial issues gave her a reputation for being tough, but also principled. She wasn't about playing politics, she was about doing what was right, even if it wasn't easy. As a U.S. Senator, Harris continued to build on that legacy of public service. She wasn't just another politician jockeying for power, she was a voice for the voiceless, someone who had lived through adversity and had dedicated her career to standing up for what was right. Whether questioning powerful CEOs during Senate hearings or demanding accountability from corrupt officials, Harris earned a reputation for her sharp intellect, unwavering focus, and moral clarity. She wasn't afraid to speak truth to power, and that's exactly what made her a target for people like Ted Cruz. But Cruz didn't understand Harris. He didn't understand the depth of the fortitude she had developed over her lifetime. He thought she was just another politician, a woman of color in an establishment that had long been dominated by men like him. He underestimated the quiet power she carried, the steady resolve that she had built over decades of fighting for justice, and the way she had learned to maintain composure even when the world seemed to be crumbling around her. As Cruz delivered his cheap shot, confident that he could rattle her, Harris remained unmoved. She had faced far worse than this, fought through systemic biases, institutional obstacles, and personal attacks throughout her career. She had learned long ago that the way to win was not to fight fire with fire, but to use her calm strength as a shield against those who sought to tear her down. She had fought her entire life for the right to be heard, and she knew that in moments like these, her silence could be more powerful than any response. So, when Cruz launched his personal attack, Harris knew that this wasn't about her, this was about something much bigger. She wasn't just fighting to defend herself, she was defending the integrity of the office she held, the integrity of truth, and the dignity of those who, like her, had to fight to be seen. This wasn't about responding to Cruz's provocation with anger, it was about rising above it with the kind of calm strength that Cruz could never comprehend. And as the Senate chamber waited, breathless, for Harris's next move, it became clear, Cruz had underestimated her, and his arrogance would be his downfall. Harris wasn't going to let his taunt slide, she was going to use it to show the world what true leadership looked like. The strategy was clear: stay calm, stay focused, and expose Cruz for what he really was, nothing more than a man who thrived on chaos, desperate to break down the integrity of others. And in that moment, Harris knew that her strength, her composure, and her commitment to justice were the perfect antidote to his toxic rhetoric. The stage was set. And what would come next was something Cruz, and the nation, would never forget. Ted Cruz wasn't done. Far from it. His eyes narrowed, lips twisted into a smirk as he saw the effect of his earlier jab. Harris hadn't flinched, not a single muscle moved. It only made him more determined, more vicious. Cruz knew that he had to escalate the attack if he was going to break her composure. He leaned in, his voice rising in volume and intensity. "You know, Madam Vice President," he began, his words dripping with contempt, "for someone who claims to be a champion for justice, you certainly have a curious way of picking and choosing which fights are worth your time. Perhaps it's easier to focus on headline-grabbing issues than actually solving the problems that matter to Americans, isn't it?" The room was silent now, as the senators shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The atmosphere was charged, like electricity hanging in the air before a storm. Cruz's words echoed across the chamber, cutting through the stillness. He had stepped up the attack, now directly questioning Harris's ability to prioritize the right issues, to actually serve the people. He wanted to expose her as out of touch, someone who played politics instead of truly governing. Harris, still unmoved, did not break her gaze from him. She was a statue, composed and unshaken. The sharp edge of his insult had come and gone, but there was no sign that it had landed. Cruz's words, so carefully crafted to elicit a visible reaction, had simply bounced off her. He wasn't rattling her. He was just wasting breath. Cruz noticed. He could feel the walls closing in, and frustration began to creep into his posture. He wasn't used to being ignored. He thrived on the reaction, the emotional exchange. But Harris wasn't giving him the satisfaction. "Or perhaps you're too busy patting yourself on the back for being the first woman of color in the White House," Cruz continued, his voice sharper now. Let's face it, your rise isn't a testament to your qualifications, but to the fact that the party has been willing to put anyone in power as long as they fit the right identity politics. Maybe that's why you're so out of touch with the real problems facing this country. This time, the words were more pointed, more personal. Cruz knew he was crossing a line, but he didn't care. He was desperate. He had to break her. His eyes were wild, his voice rising higher as he pushed harder, hoping to force a slip-up, a crack in her unyielding composure. And yet, Harris didn't budge. She sat there, stoic, as if his words were simply noise. She had been here before, facing challenges that could have broken anyone else, yet she had come through it all stronger. She knew exactly what Cruz was trying to do, provoke a moment of weakness, capture a misstep. But she also knew that the only way to win this battle was to stay above the fray. Senator Cruz, Harris spoke softly, her voice steady and calm, but it carried with the weight of truth. You seem to be very focused on identity, on my rise. But this isn't about me. This is about the American people, the ones who are waiting for us to do the hard work of governance. A ripple went through the room. The senators had been on edge since the attack began, but now they could feel the tide shifting. Harris hadn't raised her voice, hadn't broken a sweat. She had simply returned his barb with a force that cut through the chamber like a blade through glass. There was a quiet hum in the air now, a sense of anticipation as Harris spoke again, her gaze still locked on Cruz. Perhaps if you spent more time focusing on what's right for this country, instead of playing petty political games, you'd understand that this isn't about scoring points, Senator. This is about service. Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Cruz blinked, his jaw tightening. It was clear now that Harris wasn't the type to be rattled. Her quiet strength had become an unspoken weapon, more lethal than anything Cruz could throw at her. Still, he wasn't backing down. With a sharp inhale, Cruz tried again, the sarcasm evident in his voice. Ah, yes. Service. How noble. But perhaps you should take a closer look at the damage your policies have done, particularly to working-class Americans who've been left behind by the very system you claim to uphold. You've spent your career talking about justice, but you haven't delivered results for the people who need it most. And that's the truth, no matter how you try to spin it. The chamber grew even quieter. Harris didn't react. She didn't need to. Her silence, her unwavering poise, was all the response that was needed. Cruz's words were harsh, but they were growing increasingly hollow, no matter how hard he tried to mask his desperation. The room could feel it now, Cruz was running out of steam. The more he jabbed, the more he revealed his own insecurity. His attacks were no longer cutting through Harris's calm. Instead, they were bouncing off her like water off a stone. Cruz was growing agitated. He wasn't getting the response he expected. He was losing control. Harris knew the moment was near. The time for composure was over. Her counterattack, when it came, would not be fueled by anger or emotion. It would be precise, calculated, and devastating. The room could sense it. The quiet before the storm. But the mic drop moment was just around the corner. The tension in the Senate chamber was thick. Ted Cruz, his face flushed with frustration, had just unleashed his final salvo, and yet, there she was, Kamala Harris, unfazed, unshaken. The silence was palpable, the air almost electric. Cruz's attack had failed to crack her resolve. His words, designed to humiliate, had instead turned against him. But Harris wasn't done yet. She took a breath, her composure as solid as ever, but in her eyes, something had shifted, something sharper. The moment had arrived. Senator Cruz, Harris began, her voice quiet but carrying a weight that could not be ignored. You seem determined to make this about me, about identity, about political games. But if we're going to talk about service, let's talk about the service we owe to the American people. She paused, allowing her words to sink in. Because it's not about being the loudest or the most divisive, it's about delivering results, results that change lives. Cruz scoffed, shifting in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. He had expected her to falter, to get flustered, but instead, she was unrelenting, her calm becoming more powerful by the second. The truth, Senator, Harris continued, her eyes locking onto his, is that your entire approach is based on a false premise. You say I'm out of touch with the people, but let's be clear, it's not me who's disconnected from reality. It's you. The room held its collective breath as Harris's words cut through the noise. Cruz's expression shifted, but he tried to mask his discomfort with a tight smile. He wasn't ready for what was coming next. You attack my record, she said, her tone unwavering. You accuse me of playing identity politics, but the truth is, your entire career is built on dividing the country, on pitting Americans against each other for your own political gain. You've spent years making a spectacle out of every issue that matters, not because you want to find solutions, but because you thrive on chaos. You thrive on conflict. Her voice grew a little louder, but still measured, still cool. You think it's a victory to tear down the progress we've made, to call people like me unqualified or too busy with identity politics. But here's the reality, you are nothing but a distraction. You have spent years attacking the very fabric of this country, our values, our unity, and our commitment to justice, while refusing to offer anything substantive. Harris paused, allowing her words to sink in. Cruz shifted uncomfortably in his seat again, but she wasn't done. You want to talk about results, Senator? Let's talk about what you've actually accomplished. While I've fought for policies that protect the vulnerable, expand access to healthcare, and promote racial justice, you've spent your time engaging in cheap theatrics, grandstanding for the cameras, and ignoring the real issues Americans face. You're not offering a solution to climate change. You're not offering solutions for the millions of Americans without healthcare. You're certainly not offering anything meaningful to address the inequities in our justice system. Her eyes never left his. The Senate chamber was as quiet as it had ever been, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Cruz looked like he wanted to retort, but something in her gaze made him hesitate. She continued, her words slow, deliberate. You've spent so much time attacking, Senator, that you've forgotten why we're here. We're here to serve the people, not our egos, not our party's interests, but the people who are depending on us to do the right thing. You've turned service into a game, and it's a game that's cost Americans their trust in this institution. The sting of her criticism was evident now. Cruz's expression was a mask of frustration, his lips pressed together in an attempt to hold back the retort that was surely bubbling beneath the surface. But Harris wasn't finished. The most cutting words were yet to come. You see, Senator, you are the embodiment of everything that is wrong with this system, Harris said, her voice low but piercing. You're the politician who plays on fear, who plays on division, and who seeks power not to serve, but to dominate. You want to talk about what's wrong with America. You're part of the problem. And no amount of personal attacks, no amount of political posturing, can change that fact. There was a beat of absolute silence. Cruz sat there, his mouth slightly agape, unable to respond. His usual bravado, his ever-present confidence, had evaporated. He knew he had been bested, not just in the argument, but in the way the nation would perceive this exchange. The truth of Harris's words hung in the air, cutting through the room like a blade. The Senate chamber remained still. No one moved, no one spoke. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The audience, both in the room and watching from home, could feel the shift. It was as if Harris's words had momentarily suspended reality, leaving Cruz with nowhere to go. Finally, Cruz attempted to recover, but the words failed him. He sputtered, but nothing coherent came out. He was lost, floundering, his power crumbling before him in the face of Harris's quiet strength. And then, just as the moment reached its peak, the silence was broken. It started as a murmur, a low ripple of disbelief that quickly built into something louder. Applause began to spread throughout the room. Some senators rose to their feet, giving Harris a standing ovation. The cameras clicked, capturing the moment, but it wasn't just the Senate floor that erupted. Social media had already begun to buzz with reactions, hashtags trending in real time. Hashtag Kamala owns, hashtag mic drop, hashtag Senator for the people. These were just a few of the phrases that flooded Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram as the world reacted to her response. Political commentators were already dissecting the exchange, praising Harris for her poised dismantling of Cruz's attacks. Celebrities chimed in with their support. People were watching, and they were impressed. Cruz, meanwhile, was left sputtering. His smirk was gone, his confidence shattered. He had been humiliated, not by the sheer force of Harris's words, but by the calm, measured precision with which she had taken him apart. He wasn't just defeated, he was exposed. Harris had turned the tables on him, and in doing so, she had shown the world exactly what true leadership looked like. In the battle of words, Cruz had lost. But in this moment, Harris had won something far more important: respect. The villain's downfall was complete. The moment Kamala Harris delivered her masterful takedown of Ted Cruz, the entire Senate chamber seemed to hold its breath. But that was only the beginning. The real shockwaves began to spread almost immediately, rippling out from the floor of the Senate and into every corner of American life. Social media exploded with a fervor that could not be ignored. Within minutes of Harris's mic drop moment, Twitter was flooded with reactions. Hashtags like hashtag Kamala owns, hashtag Cruz exposed, and hashtag Senator for the people began trending nationally, then globally. The debate, which had once seemed like a dry political exchange, had transformed into a viral spectacle. On Twitter, thousands of users tweeted their reactions in real time, commenting on how Harris had deftly dismantled Cruz's personal attacks without breaking a sweat. One meme surfaced almost immediately, a split screen showing Cruz's increasingly flustered face on one side and Harris, calm and composed, on the other. The caption read, "When you realize you messed with the wrong person." It was shared thousands of times within hours, adding fuel to the viral fire. Another meme featured a now iconic still of Harris's piercing stare with the text, "I'm not here to play games, I'm here to win." Influencers and political commentators jumped on the bandwagon, posting videos, reactions, and analyses. Some added their own spin, focusing on the personal dignity Harris maintained throughout, while others highlighted Cruz's downfall. Within hours, a clip of her response had been shared millions of times on every platform, from Instagram to TikTok to Facebook. The moment had become an indelible part of the political conversation. On Instagram, thousands of posts flooded the feed, many sharing quotes from Harris's response. "You thrive on conflict, Senator, but I'm here to solve problems," one post said, followed by hashtag Kamala owns. The post quickly garnered thousands of likes and comments, most of them from users praising her poise, strength, and intellect. Influencers, who had been notoriously quiet during previous political events, now began to amplify the conversation. "This is what leadership looks like," one popular activist posted. "Kamala Harris just gave a masterclass in what it means to be strong in the face of adversity." As the social media frenzy reached a fever pitch, political pundits and journalists began chiming in. News outlets across the country replayed the moment in their nightly segments, dissecting it from every angle. MSNBC, CNN, and even conservative outlets like Fox News found themselves unable to ignore the spectacle. The moment had become a defining one in American politics. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow praised Harris for fighting back against a smear campaign with nothing but the truth. She pointed out that Cruz's attacks had no substance, relying purely on identity politics and personal insults. "What Kamala did today wasn't just defend herself," Maddow said. "She defended the office, she defended the American people, and she did it with the grace and dignity that this nation deserves." Meanwhile, Fox News commentary was less kind. Sean Hannity, seizing on Harris's words, tried to twist them, suggesting that Harris had merely deflected Cruz's legitimate criticisms. But even Hannity couldn't ignore the fact that Cruz was visibly rattled, unable to mount a serious counterattack. And viewers could tell. The comments section exploded, not just with partisan outrage, but with a growing recognition that Harris had emerged victorious. Celebrities, usually hesitant to enter into political battles, didn't shy away this time. Actor and activist, Mark Ruffalo, tweeted, "Incredible poise, Kamala Harris. The way she owned that room. If you weren't paying attention, you just missed history being made." Across Hollywood, more stars joined the chorus of support. Director Ava DuVernay shared a clip of Harris's response with the caption, "When you've worked your whole life to get to this moment, and you don't flinch when the most powerful guy in the room comes for you." But while Harris received widespread praise, Cruz was not so fortunate. As the hours passed, the damage to his reputation became evident. The same people who had once lauded his fiery rhetoric now found themselves questioning the substance behind his words. Critics were quick to point out the hypocrisy in his attacks, how he had consistently failed to deliver meaningful solutions on the issues he claimed to care about. His arrogance, once a point of pride, now seemed like a glaring flaw in the face of Harris's unshakable confidence. On social media, memes mocking Cruz's failure to respond effectively flooded the internet. One meme depicted Cruz as a cartoon character, his mouth moving but no words coming out, with the caption, "When you try to mess with the wrong woman." The hashtag #CruzFail began trending, and for the first time in a long while, the once untouchable senator found himself on the receiving end of ridicule. Political strategists, both on the left and the right, took to cable news to analyze what this exchange meant for the future of American politics. Many pointed out how Cruz's attempt to discredit Harris had backfired, turning her into a figure of strength and dignity. His failure to counter her with anything substantive had exposed his tactic for what it was, a cheap attempt to score political points rather than engage in meaningful debate. This moment, said political analyst Chris Matthews, may have just shifted the balance in Washington. Cruz's brand of politics has always thrived on division, but Kamala Harris proved today that leadership isn't about creating enemies, it's about finding common ground and working for the people. The narrative around Cruz's tactics began to shift rapidly. His personal attack on Harris was seen less as a calculated political maneuver and more as a desperate attempt to cling to power in a changing political landscape. He had relied too heavily on divisiveness and had underestimated Harris, a woman who had spent her career breaking barriers and standing tall in the face of adversity. This exchange marked a turning point, not just for Cruz, but for the American public. The line between real leadership and empty rhetoric had never been so stark. Harris had shown the world that power wasn't about making noise, it was about staying steady, about standing up for what was right, and about refusing to back down. The political impact of this confrontation couldn't be overstated. Cruz's approach to politics, built on spectacle and division, had met its match in Harris's grounded, calm authority. The narrative had shifted, and with it, the course of American politics seemed to change just a little bit more. In the weeks and months that followed, this moment would be remembered as the point at which the tide began to turn, not just for Harris, but for the country itself. Kamala Harris stood there, the weight of the moment still palpable in the Senate chamber. The applause had faded, but the ripple effect of her words lingered in the air. She wasn't just defending herself anymore. She wasn't just taking down Ted Cruz. She was setting a standard for what true leadership looks like. And now, as the world watched, she turned toward the camera, her face composed, her eyes unwavering, a slight, thoughtful smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You see," Harris began, her voice steady and deliberate, "this moment wasn't about me, and it wasn't even about Ted Cruz. It was about something much bigger, something that goes to the heart of what this country stands for. The truth is, when we enter public service, when we step up to serve the people, we are held to a higher standard. We are expected to act with dignity, integrity, and respect for the truth. Far too often, in this toxic political climate, we see leaders who are more interested in dividing people, in sowing chaos, than in solving problems. We see those who seek power not to serve, but to dominate, not to uplift, but to undermine. It's easy to stand on the sidelines, throwing stones at the system and pointing fingers at the opposition. But true leadership doesn't lie in tearing others down, it lies in lifting people up, in finding common ground, and in fighting for the greater good. Today, Senator Cruz attempted to distract from the real issues, to use personal attacks as a tool for his own political gain. But I won't let that define this moment, because this moment isn't about games. It's about what's right. It's about truth. It's about the work we have to do every single day to make this country better for everyone. No one should be distracted by petty politics. We're better than that. Her voice rang out, clear and firm, her words flowing with a kind of quiet power that left no room for doubt. We are here to serve the people, not ourselves. We are here to do the hard work, even when it's uncomfortable. Even when the other side would rather fight than listen. It's easy to fall into the trap of name-calling and division. But I'm telling you now, when you choose truth, when you choose integrity, when you choose dignity, no matter the opposition, you choose the path that will always lead to the real victory. Harris paused, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. Because in the end, truth and integrity will always prevail over arrogance and division. Her words hung in the air like a powerful declaration, a declaration that transcended the Senate floor, reaching out to the millions watching from their homes, from their phones, from every corner of the country. It was a message that resonated deeply, tapping into a hunger for something different, something real in a world that so often felt fractured and chaotic. And let me be clear, Harris continued, her voice unwavering, this fight isn't just mine. It's ours. It's the fight of every person who has ever been told they don't belong, every person who has ever been silenced, every person who has fought for their voice to be heard. This fight is for those who have been told they can't break barriers, those who have been told their dreams are out of reach. It's for the people who believe in justice, in equality, in the power of unity, and who know deep down that we're all stronger when we come together. She looked directly into the camera, her gaze steady, purposeful, as though she were speaking to each viewer personally. I want you to think about this, every day, we face choices. We can choose to follow the path that is easy, that gives us comfort and recognition in the moment. Or we can choose to stand up for what's right, to choose the long road, one that's filled with sacrifice, challenges, and even the risk of failure. But it's in that struggle, in that commitment to truth, that we find our real strength. It's in standing up for each other, in choosing dignity over division, that we build a future worth fighting for. Harris took another breath, her expression softening, yet her resolve was unwavering. So, let's not let the distractions of the moment define us. Let's not let the noise of politics drown out what we know is true. We are here for one reason, to serve the people. To make this nation a place where everyone, no matter who they are, where they come from, or what they look like, can thrive. The room, and the world beyond it, could feel the weight of her words. She had done more than just defend herself from Cruz's attack. She had turned the tables, not with anger or theatrics, but with a calm, resolute commitment to the values that would lead this country forward. This is the kind of leadership we need, she said, a final, powerful statement. It's the kind of leadership that sees people for who they are, that listens, that works, that leads with love and integrity. This is the leadership that will carry us through the hard times, that will ensure we don't just survive, but that we thrive. The chamber fell into a deep silence. Cruz, who had once seemed so confident, so self-assured, was now nothing more than a figure in the background of Harris's strength. She had won. Not just the debate, but the moment. And as the camera pulled back, the message was clear, in the face of division, of hatred, and of arrogance, dignity and truth would always win out. Harris had proven it, and now, her victory was the victory of every person who believed in justice, equality, and the power of unity. Her final words were a beacon, an invitation for everyone to rise to the occasion, to be the change they wished to see. Together, we will build that future, she said. And we'll do it with integrity, with dignity, and with truth. The audience watching, no matter their background, couldn't help but feel the power of her words. The struggle was far from over, but in that moment, Kamala Harris had reminded them why it was worth fighting for. And so, in a moment that will be remembered for years to come, Kamala Harris showed us what real leadership looks like. She didn't just fight back against a personal attack, she defended the values that this country was built on: integrity, dignity, and truth. Her calm strength, her unwavering commitment to doing what's right, stood in stark contrast to the petty politics of division and fear. This wasn't just a victory for Harris, it was a victory for all of us. It was a reminder that no matter how loud the noise gets, no matter how deep the division, truth and integrity will always prevail. In the end, it's not about the politicians or the pundits, it's about the people who believe in a better, more just America. So, what can we do now? The battle for justice doesn't end here. It's up to all of us to carry this message forward, to choose dignity over division, truth over lies, and leadership that serves the people over power that serves itself. Join the conversation. Share this message. Let's make dignity great again. The fight for what's right starts with you, with me, with all of us. Together, we can amplify voices that stand for justice, equality, and integrity. If you believe in the power of truth, if you believe in leadership that uplifts and empowers, then make sure you're part of this movement. Subscribe to this channel for more political insights and the content that breaks through the noise. Let's keep this conversation going. Because when we stand together, nothing can stop us.